Josh and Jim, you just gained 3 minutes. Or did you?
We expect you to use 4.
That's right. Our first presentation tonight is going to be by Jim Montgomery, who is our code compliance officer, director, coordinator. I knew I was going to get, and Josh Artuso, who works with Jim as the community development director, to review a proposed draft of the property maintenance code for the town of Webster. And I don't want to steal your thunder, guys, but this is the trifecta. This is the hat trick. You guys were here, I think, in November, January, and now?
Then February.
November, then February, and now April. Same topic as it's evolved. I'll hand the baton to you.
Thank you, Supervisor. So, as you just mentioned, this is our third trip to the town board workshop on this topic. So we had our first meeting back in November of 2022, and at that presentation we presented some what we had identified as deficiencies within our existing town code relating to property maintenance and enforcement of that. So we came back in February to another town board workshop and presented on the mandatory enforcement of the New York State Uniform Code, of which the property maintenance code is part of. So here we are this evening, tonight, to review and discuss a draft property maintenance chapter. Between our November meeting and tonight, we did form a little internal code committee consisting of our building inspector, our fire marshal, myself, and Jim as the code compliance coordinator. And we essentially drafted a section that we're proposing be added to the town code. So tonight's presentation will highlight some of the major components of the proposed property maintenance chapter. So within that would be the proposed articles and subsections. We've included some additional definitions. We have a section on both exterior and interior property maintenance. We also have a section that deals with both vacant structures and the maintenance of vacant lots. And then obviously including the procedural elements of the code for enforcement and the correction of violations. So you may recall this next slide is again basically showing all of the various components of the New York State Uniform Code, but tonight's focus is primarily on property maintenance. So again, I just want to emphasize that the Uniform Code is mandatory to enforce for local municipalities, and so that's why we are seeking some additional code language in our own town code to help support us with these efforts.
Excuse me?
So,
can you just point out where the property code is in this?
it's the one that's highlighted in red.
So
It has the red box around it.
Is there a website that we can go to that
Yes.
so you will
Ma'am,
supply that?
can you just come over here?
Oh, okay.
And I appreciate the workshop, we do not do public interaction, but it's not. But you have that, it's my gift to you. Should help you guys follow along, all right? Thank you.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, who's going to summarize and outline some of the components of the proposed chapter.
Thank you, Josh. It's my understanding that the board members have received a copy of the entire draft. I would encourage anyone who's watching, who's interested, to go onto the town's website and look at that as well. The entire draft is available to the public on the town's website. But I'm going to be talking about some key components of the draft itself. We won't be going over everything, to be honest. But the first thing we're going to discuss is definitions, and how There are specific roles and responsibilities within the town and the state officials, and those responsibilities and those roles are defined within this section, such as the building inspector, the fire marshal, who the code compliance coordinator is, what his role is, and what their responsibilities are as they pertain to this chapter specifically. We also improve the specificity of common terms used within the chapter, things like carports, yards, what a notice and order is. These are things that could be commonly misconstrued if they weren't defined, or they can have multiple definitions if you didn't know what we were speaking of. This next section would be the exterior property maintenance section. This is a hot-button topic within the town right now. We have a lot of issues with exterior property maintenance. But in this section, we set some basic standards for property maintenance, structures and yards. Again, these are basic standards. So for fences, is your fence standing? Has it fallen down? For ground cover, is there ground cover, right? Is there open soil, and is that open soil affecting your neighboring properties? This also helps a lot with an issue that we've discussed a few times, parking vehicles on front lawns. So instead of there being an actual provision for that, a lot of times when people park in the same spot on their front lawn, it creates a rut or a bare spot. And if we cite that person enough times with ground cover, and they start to realize, I can't park on my front lawn, it's creating a violation, you may stop doing that. Also, it goes over tall grass and weeds, and then roofs have to be watertight. Tall grass and weeds can only be, or grass can only be so tall. We do have a solid waste management section in our town code already, but the garbage and refuse section of the property maintenance chapter goes over more about what we consider to be junk, outdoor storage of said junk. Basically what we define junk as in the town code, or in this proposed chapter, would be an item that's not readily usable for its intended purpose. So in the picture you can see on the slide, there's scrap metal, there's a treadmill, just miscellaneous items that are being stored outside that cause a blight to the neighborhood, and that shouldn't be stored outside. So within that blanket definition, it can help us to enforce these kinds of things that are being stored outside. We also go over things that are currently being enforced, but we don't really have a code. So it's things like leaf pickup. Department of Public Works, the Highway Department currently operates a leaf pickup. And they have set regulations for that leaf pickup, but nothing is actually in the code. So we'd like to create this as part of our property maintenance chapter. And then the last thing in this that we're going to talk about briefly is commercial dumpster enclosures. This is something that we're already doing with any new building that's coming into the town. For instance, the Jiffy Lube that was just finished. There is a dumpster enclosure there, but there's a lot of pre-existing structures within the town that don't have dumpster enclosures. They do cause a blight. They are unsanitary. We'd like to have them screened from the public view.
So those are dumpsters not used for a small period of time. They're there all the time, say for a restaurant.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. For interior property maintenance, we're not very clear. These are basic bare minimum standards. We're not telling you where you can hang your TV in your house. These are life safety issues. So, do you have the proper smoke detectors in your home? Are they, in each bedroom? Are they in? This is all state law. Are they in the hallway outside the bedroom? Are they on every floor that has a combustible appliance? Egress requirements, such things like does each bedroom in the home have 5.7 square feet of egress? For drainage, this is a big one for cross connections. So are you pumping sewage into town storm sewers, which is an issue that goes down the line. You can overcharge storm sewers. There's obviously pollutants going into the town storm sewers. And then finally, electrical maintenance. So is there bare wires hanging in the house that could cause electrocution? A lot of these things, I want to be very clear too, that we're not busting our way, or we're not impeding into someone's home and saying that there's all these things wrong. A lot of times tenants of rentals will call my department and say, my landlord's not fixing X, Y, and Z. I think this is a health safety issue. And that's when I get invited into the home, and that's when I see these things. For vacant structures, We define what a vacant structure is in this subchapter. Essentially, it's a structure that's been vacant for 60 days. It would now fall into that vacant structure category. And we do basic, again, bare minimum things like we would require the person who's the previous owner, whoever is responsible for that property, to remove the combustible waste, whether it be the bank or if it has an actual owner. We want to get rid of that combustible waste material so it can't start a fire. And also we want those structures to be secured, whether it be locking of a door or if there is no door, it had to be boarded, things like that. For vacant lot maintenance, we go over the removal of combustible materials again, the removal of heavy undergrowth, tall grass, weeds, any kind of ivy, things like that that are going to be a problem to neighboring properties. A big one, again, this is for developed areas. A lot of times developers will sell a lot of the lots in the neighborhood, but there'll be one or two that don't get sold. And then they just kind of get neglected for years. There's a couple examples in the town. And a lot of times this will cause large undergrowth and overgrowth to affect neighboring properties. So what we're going to propose is that, and this is done in other municipalities, that there's a 15-foot perimeter that's maintained around these lots so that this ivy or whatever is not growing into the neighboring property and creating an issue for a neighbor who is maintaining their yard. And actually, obviously, there are exemptions to this rule, and one of our exemptions would be, is if the lot is actually being developed. If there's active development going on, you don't need to maintain the clump of grass that's 2 feet tall, because eventually everything's going to be developed as we go. For enforcement and compliance, we designate who the town officials are that actually enforce these codes. Again, the building inspector, the fire marshal, myself, the code compliance coordinator, and then we identify, or we go over things that we need to present on request. So we need to be able to identify ourselves on request. And then we go over things like postings and placards, things that we can put on residential properties, that we have the right to put on residential properties. I know a lot of residents don't like seeing a pink notice on the front door. It's not a great thing to come home to, but we do have the right to do that so that you can be notified of a violation if it's serious enough, or in a more serious effort, if we have to put a placard on a house to say that it's unsafe for occupancy. In the correction of violations section, we go over the commencement of proceedings. So exactly what is going to happen once the notice and order is issued, what the notice and order is, how it's delivered. We provide a reasonable time period to achieve compliance, and then also there's the emergency action. So if we can't wait for the notice and order to be mailed out and to be received by the resident, emergency action, if health and safety is immediately going to be affected, what would we have to do to correct the violation? And this kind of outlines exactly what we have the right to do. In violations, instances of non-compliance, we go over the procedure, the internal procedure and what's going out to the public. So we would first issue a notice and order, and then if there is no compliance after the notice and order, an appearance ticket would be issued, and then which would ultimately result in a court hearing, and then the civil penalty would then fall into place. And this section essentially says what the civil penalty could be a max fine of, and that's up to the discretion of the judge. But there is an executive law that states that it can be no more than $1,000 per day. So our next steps would be we need to await our legal review and feedback before we do anything else. Our legal team is working on reviewing this proposed chapter. Then we would have a town board resolution to set a public hearing. We would hold that public hearing. We would make any final edits. We would adopt it into the town code, and then we'd be able to effectively address the long-standing problems that we have in town. That's all I have for you tonight. Are there any questions from the board?
On vacant properties, with respect to electricity, you're indicating it has to be in a safe operational condition. My concern is sump pumps. If you have a vacant property, typically the electricity will be turned off. Therefore, you have a non-operational sump pump, which will lead to flooding in the basement. How do we as a town, or you as the code enforcement officer, I mean, you can check to see outside if the electricity is on or off. How do you get the electricity turned on if you don't know who owns the property?
Right, so
Or who's responsible for the maintenance of the
well, that's a
property?
great question. In the past, what we've done, we actually consider that to be an emergency action, because it can cause flooding and cause other issues. So we would actually have a third-party contractor go in and actually just pump it out instead of turning on the power to get their sump pump to kick on. So there was
So how do you, yeah, but how do you get the electricity turned back on, and whose name's turned?
We wouldn't-
This is gonna flood again?
we wouldn't turn it back on.
No. So it's just gonna continue to flood?
Correct.
Okay.
I have one question. You know that the village outlaws parking in the front yard, other than if you're having your driveway sealed, if you're getting a party or something like that. Why can't we just do something like that in the town as opposed to trying to cite somebody for what's that, because they're always parking in front?
That's a great question.
Wouldn't there be a better way to address it?
We could.
Really, the problem is that they're parking in the front yard.
I agree. That would be something the board had to come to terms with.
Yeah, it's a great point, I totally agree with you.
My other, it's really more of a comment. I did try to read through most of what was sent out, and thank you for doing that, I appreciate it. I just wondered, as far as definitions, courts, you think we better do a courtyard?
Yes.
Is that something that's
it's
pulled from
essentially
the
the same.
state?
Yes, it's the same thing. A court is a courtyard.
I think that might be clearer.
Sure.
And thank you, I appreciate all the work that you've done on this. And I want people to be very clear that we're not going to need Big Brother going into your home to check for how many smoke detectors or any of those things, but there are certainly properties within the town that are in violation of many of these very basic codes. And this just gives us a little bit stronger arm to deal with those things.
For exterior lighting, I want to make it very clear, we're not telling you what modalities you can put in the front yard. This is just bare minimum things to keep. So there's not a light.
Yes. To respect the rights of those who live around you.
What are those zombie houses? How long is it going to take to go, through the process of to get the, the next step?
We actually don't address zombie properties in this chapter. We strictly do vacant properties, vacant structures. Zombie property is actually defined by the state, and it goes into a whole other realm that we didn't touch in this chapter.
Might be helpful if you, it might be helpful if you actually describe the difference between vacant and zombie.
Sir, and as I said before, have you ever been to a town board workshop before? It is not a forum for public input. But I want to, if you go back one screen, hang on one second. You see how it says town board resolution to set a public hearing, hold a public hearing. If we move forward with this, the public will have plenty of opportunity to opine, to give their love of it, their hate of it, all that stuff. So there will be time. Okay, that's okay. That's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Jim, I got a question for you, and I'm glad you're back. Oh,
Can
you're
I
not
tell the
done.
difference between vacant and zombie?
You
for
can,
everyone who's
yes.
watching?
Absolutely. It's my understanding. So we can define what a vacant property is. We can set a limit on how many days until we consider a vacant property. It has to fall under our standards of a vacant property. It's my understanding that a zombie property is something where it's been vacant for a number of years or a certain amount of time, but they also can't find the owner. There's no owner of record, and then it starts to actually dilapidate.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll say on this zombie versus vacant, and it does get confusing in other states, says and whatever. We did have a pretty good effort going back mid-21 through April of 22. We took, public health has identified about 30 of these zombie properties, and based on the efforts of all the departments involved in the town, I think we got that number down to 15. And so we're starting the process again to look at that and try to address those. Anyway, my question is is that based on that sequence of events that you have up there, next step, I'm glad you got it there. So if we advertise the public hearing in the newspaper, Webster Herald, and Charlie, this might be you. There is a 15-page draft here. It is a great one, by the way. But this is the draft. Isn't that what would have to go in the Webster Herald?
No, we can make a reference to the fact that we would do a very general précis or description of it and put in the paper that there is the document or the statute is 15 pages long and that it will be available.
I'm glad to hear that because I think we'd have to pay some money to the Webster Herald. That's a couple of pages. Well, that's good to hear. And already, just based on the questions that Patty and John and Ginny had, that's kind of a pseudo, like you're going into these different things in this 15 pages and asking questions. And that's what will happen in the public hearing part, which I would bet you dollars to donuts, this draft will not be the final version that the town adopts in the town code because Jim and Josh have done a great job on this. But there will be people that chime in, just like you said about parking, on the lawn. Maybe that's the better way. Court, make it courtyards, just little things like that, or big things that will come out through this process. So,
I think probably, well, I know we would have available on our website, and then I think also
Sure.
you have printed copies at town hall.
Sure. Bill?
I'm good.
Yeah. You did a good job.
Yes.
And I remember, was it the one in February, the one in February we had like a proposed timeline? And my memory's going. If we were to do a resolution at a future board meeting to set a public hearing on this, what were you envisioning?
For time?
Yeah, like would we be doing that resolution at the May 4th meeting, at the May 11th, the May 18th? And that's the next step is really a resolution to set public hearing. I appreciate you got awaiting legal review and feedback. I can speak, which I know that you have engaged Town Attorney Genesi, and also I don't remember if Judge Portori was involved in this, but Judge Thomas Sullivan has been involved in this. So is that what the legal review, there's been interaction with
Yes.
court system here at Webster and also with the town attorney. But I appreciate the first step there is you're looking for some additional stuff. And I can appreciate that because I'm sure Charlie and Judge Sullivan, you probably just saw this the first time.
Yeah, I would like to discuss this further. Not
question.
here, but yes.
Yep. Which in and of itself might end up being what is the draft that ends up being referenced in a resolution to set a public hearing. So, yeah, I mean, I know that if you do a resolution to set a public hearing, we just did one tonight. What is it there? Like, it's no less than 10.
No, for a local law, 5 days, between 5 and 10 years. Prior to hearing. And the other rule is that the board has to have as completed as possible the local law before it, at least a week.
So, I mean, the way we put stuff in the Webster Herald right now, the Wednesday edition of the Webster Herald, it's a weekly periodical, we would be doing the public hearing 8 days after that. Would that be correct? The Thursday subsequent to the prior Wednesday that it was in the paper?
Yeah, it would be in the paper Wednesday,
Did we just do the math correctly?
Yes.
So that'll give you something to chew on as you get the legal feedback and whatever, and when, work with me on when you want to come for the resolution to set the public.
I mean, I can answer public questions, or any questions the public has at any point. If they want to give me a call, I can answer questions.
I have no doubt you would do that, Jim, because like I said, there will be plenty of opportunity for public input into this process as it goes along to whether it gets adopted or whether it's is yet a new room for. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah.